Hey guys, welcome back to RMA Garage. I'm Mark, and yes, I'm glad you joined us today. You know, we say these catchphrases all the time and don't realize when you do a bunch of videos that it's always so. Anyway, we are glad that you joined us today. We are continuing working on my son's YZ250FX 2015, and today we are going to go and clean the front brake here. It's really simple. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but there was one little modification that we did to make this a lot easier to work on in the future, and we'll get into that in a little bit. All right, so let's get to it. So we're here at the front brake, and I'm going to show you that piece that I purchased right off the bat here, but we're not going to remove it just yet. But if I direct your attention down here, this is the pin that holds the brake pads on. And if you notice, this is the original factory one. It has the socket head, hex socket head. And sometimes these things can get rounded out, as the case with this bike, and I'll put a link below in that video on how you extract this bolt when it gets stripped out. Okay, I went ahead and purchased an aftermarket bolt here, and as you can see, it does not have a hex. It has a regular bolt head. So I don't have to use an Allen wrench to take it off. I can just use the wrench. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just loosen this up just a little bit, because it is a lot easier to loosen this while the caliper is still bolted to the bike. So we got that loose. And now I can go ahead and take the caliper off. This, by the way, is a number 10, and these shouldn't be too tight. Oop. Okay. There's only 2 bolts holding this on, of course. Okay, so we got that off. So as you can see, this pin obviously this is the rear pin, so it's a little longer than it. The front one is toast. That's why I don't have it. That was the one that I stripped out, so I ended up throwing it away. So as you can see, this is sticking out just a little bit, so you can put the number 8 wrench on here, and I could probably use a ratchet, or my electric ratchet that I love so much. All right, so now that's loose. And there's the pin. Now I want to show you that the threads are a lot longer on it as well, so it's long enough so it can get out to the edge, and then you can get to the bolt head. Okay, so this here also too, if you can see it, it's a little bit silvery. I put anti-seize on these threads as well, just to keep from the bolt getting stuck in and of itself into the aluminum housing here. All right, so that's the secret. Now we can take the pads out here. Pads aren't too dirty. Again, I've said this many times in the video that I really haven't, there's not a lot of time on this bike. Andrew didn't ride that much. So that's basically it. Now we're going to get to cleaning. All right, as in the last video, basically I've got my bucket of warm water here. The last video meaning the rear brake. I basically just like to soak it to loosen up the dirt as much as possible. And again, this brake is really clean. I'm not going to lie to you. He doesn't have a lot of time on this bike. This is my son's bike, so he didn't really ride it much when he was home. last summer. He had his internship with his school, his future employer, although he's not working for them. He did work a lot, he was working out of town with his internship. So he didn't have a chance to ride his bike as much as he wanted to. And again, I'm using a brass brush so it doesn't hurt the aluminum. And what I like to do is just get into the nooks and crannies. I said nooks and crannies in the last video too. It just must be the best way to describe this. And all I'm doing is just knocking off the pitted dirt that's on the aluminum in the areas that are dirty. Just making it a little shiny. I have this theory that if something is clean to begin with, when it gets dirty, it's easy to clean the first time. But if the dirt remains, the dirt becomes more stubborn to remove later. I don't know. Is that a scientific study? Could be. All right, we won't go crazy with this one. Make it a nice short video. All right, that's for the most part clean. And the brake pads, they're not real dirty. These are the OEM. We had to end up replacing these pads because the fork seals leaked and they totally drenched the pads. So we ended up having to get new pads. And quite honestly, I like the OEMs, the Nissan pads. I think they grab very well and they have good modulation. So if you just have a little bit of brake, they're not grabby, they don't fade. I just like them. I'm a big fan of OEM parts. I think they tend to last longer, I should say. They always seem to do. Here's the metal clips in the back, and we'll put all this back in. This one actually fell out again. Usually sometimes these are in there really hard and they don't come off of the actual caliper itself. This is the one that fits in the back here. And sometimes it's hard to get out, but this one popped right out as well. Still in good shape though. There we go, getting the little scuffing off, making it smooth again. And then somewhere in here, there's another clip. And there's the other clip. It has a little bit more, I wouldn't say rust, but just the similar metals, a little bit of patina on it, just gonna smooth that out a little bit. All right, that's it. Wasn't really dirty to begin with. I do try get in here and clean the dirt and mud out of these little places here. Sometimes dirt and mud get caked underneath these pistons, and I try and get those out as much as possible. And then there's the molding of the casting of this caliper. They have little divots in here that I make sure that I get all the dirt out from underneath there, just so they don't work on the seals. All right, so now we're good. All right, so let's start. Well, oh wow, look at that. That looks a little dirty. Let's clean that off a little bit more. There we go. You never really see underneath the bike, but that was definitely dirtier than I first saw. Okay, now we're good and clean. All right, so let's dry this stuff off and start putting it back together. All right, so everything is dried off and completely clean for the most part. Again, this is a dirt bike. It's not going to be 100% clean all the time. First thing we're going to install is the spring on the front, or where the pin goes. Just make sure that it fits flush down into that spot. There we go. Okay, and then we have the retainer clip in the back. And you notice there's a little U shape. That U shape corresponds with that. So we want to slide that in like so. And that should snap into place at some point. There we go. There we go. So that one went in. And again, leave a comment below if you think I'm crazy, but I've put grease on these and on this, and after a couple of washings and a couple of rides, they're just, it's gone. I mean, you'd be constantly trying to keep that in. All right, so now we're ready for the pads. Get those all into place. Sometimes it gets a little finicky, but they'll slide in. You just have to make sure that the holes line up here. And we have to make sure that the pads are all slid completely back into that little slot. And that's what allows us to get this pin in. Okay, so it's for the most part lined up, but what you normally have to do is pull these down to get that pin to slide in. Okay, so I'm going to hold that on my knee if I can, and I've got the pin here ready to be reinstalled. So we have, this is our pin, and I've got some dielectric grease here, and I don't know, shout out to the manufacturers who make, I mean, Permatex is the greatest stuff in the world, but I can't stand these things. Look how deformed it is. Why can't they make it out of plastic or something where it doesn't get all deformed? Because when you squeeze it, it just goes everywhere and it's just a mess. So I'm going to use just a tiny little bit. Okay. And once it starts to thread in, it'll coat the inside of the caliper and hopefully prevent it from getting stuck. All right, so we got to make sure these are in all the way, and we got to push these down because it is spring loaded. Sometimes a little finicky, but nevertheless, that's why we do these videos, to show you that it's not always the easiest thing in the world to do. Okay, just double check our clearances, make sure that everything is going good. Okay. Sometimes the hardest part is doing this on camera, making sure that you get all the angle that we... Okay, it is threading in nice and easy. To me, this is so much easier than the socket head. Now, you've probably asked yourself, why didn't he do the rear? Well, the rear never stripped out. So, it never stripped out. I never really had an issue. But you're probably wondering, I did buy one. So it's new in the package, ready to be used for the rear. But of course, why use it if I don't need to use it? So I don't know, maybe a future video of me trying to take a threaded hex head out of the rear brake. And this is not going to be very tight. I think this is maybe 4 or 5 pounds torque, but I don't even follow that. I just make it just tight enough where I know it's not going to come out. And if anybody's ever used anti-seize, you always know that it gets pretty much everywhere. So you have to wipe it off of everything that it touched. So we're going to take our towel. We're going to clean this off as much as possible, because once you get anti-seize on your hands, sometimes it doesn't want to come off right away. Okay. So we got plenty there, and we're ready to go. All right, so we're ready to put this back on. And obviously you know that the actual thread is actually in the caliper, so you never, ever, ever, and I mean ever, ever, want to install this without the proper torque specs, because buying a new caliper probably is not cheap. So we got our torque wrench here set at 20 foot-pounds. So we're gonna, uh-oh, is our torque wrench broke? Our torque wrench might be broke. Oh no, our torque wrench is broke. How did that happen? All right guys, I'm kind of bummed my torque wrench just died. It won't hold. I have it at 20 PSI and it just keeps going. The gears in the head are gone. Oh man, I gotta buy a new torque wrench. I won't tell you what brand this is, but it didn't last as durably as I thought. All right, well, we'll just give this a snug and we'll have to revisit it just so it doesn't come loose, but you certainly do not want to over tighten these because of the aluminum. All right guys, that's it. We just cleaned the caliper and we're ready to go. Well guys, that's it for today's video. We had one casualty today. The torque wrench is gone. We're going to have to throw it away. I don't know if it can be fixed, but I don't know if I'd want to repair a torque wrench. I'd want to make sure that it always worked properly, especially when dealing with aluminum. Please leave a comment below on what torque wrench you guys like to use, and I will do a review maybe on it or a comparison, because we need to find a new torque wrench. So, but anyway guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss more videos coming from RMA Garage.